Native warm season grass hay can be more productive than typical cool season perennials, tall fescue, orchard grass, brome grass. Also, it can be more productive than the annuals. And there's no risk of prussic acid or nitrate problems with the hay.
Also gives you quite a bit better wildlife habitat than other crops.
Not to mention, the production costs are lower. Let's get into a few tips and tricks of how to manage a native warm season grass hayfield for success. So when doing native warm season grass hay, there are 3 crucial things to think about: cutting height, timing, and frequency. So we're going to explore each of those in depth, and we're also going to hit a few more things like fertility and signs of stand weakening, those sort of things.
So if you look here at this windrow, between the windrows here behind us, between us, there is, you can see the higher strips of grass. A lot of it got knocked down by wheel traffic and whatnot. But he's cut between 6 and 10 inches high, depending on where his blades was and how it cut. And the greener strips are what you see that's higher. There's a little bit more leaf left. You can see in the brown strips there's really no leaf left at all, or no green left. And that's the difference between cutting above or below that growth point. So you want to watch that when you're cutting. You'd like for it all to be between 8 and 10 inches after you cut for the fastest regrowth. And you'll actually notice a lot of times farmers will tell you that before they can get their hay out of the field, which is usually just 2 or 3 days after they cut, they'll already be seeing regrowth come back off of the stobs that are left behind when they get it cut above the growth point.
So with that 8-inch height that we're aiming for, and 10 is fine, there's no problem with that. The more you leave, the faster recovery is, because we're removing less of that factory. But when you think about these tall grasses, such as we can see over there, there's leaf blades, up to here. Tall grasses need to be managed tall. And that's not because they're fragile or weak, it's because they have a different way of growing. They have a taller growing point. And so the meristem, or growing point of that grass, is actually off the ground, let's just say 4 inches or something like that. And it's down here in this stem. So when you're cutting high at 8 inches, you're not really losing anything as far as quantity, and for sure not in quality, because you're just leaving the stem behind. Well, that's poor quality hay. There's no statistical difference in the quantity of hay yield by cutting higher, because all you're doing is the little bit of stem tissue that's down there. This is all we're losing, is some brown leaves and a little bit of stem. So we're not really losing quantity by not cutting that, and we're sure picking up the quality by not having this in our hay bale.
So another factor on cutting height is, with the stubble left up here above the ground, you actually elevate your hay up off of the earth, so it's not laying flat down on the ground in the damp soil. It's elevated up on like a little pin cushion, and it actually helps it cure and dry faster, both after you rake it and before you rake it.
When farmers are told that they should cut at 8 inches, which is a lot different than what we're typically doing with like an introduced cool season hay variety or an alfalfa, either one, cutting a lot lower. When they're told to cut that high, a lot of times they're like, how do I set my equipment that high? I don't even know how to.
There's a few different methods people use. One is cylinder stops, or stroke limiting cylinders. Another is shoes that go on the edges of your mower that elevate your cutting bar. And another way you can change it a little is by the tilt of your cutting bar. So those are some methods people use. Of course, different mowers are set up to use different limiting factors for height. So you need to consult your owner's manual if you're not sure. So there's some aftermarket kits available for different mowers and things of that nature. And a lot of farmers just fabricate their own. A lot of times there's already skid shoes on there that elevate it, but not quite enough. So they just modify those with a welder in the shop to raise it on up a little. The timing of when to cut native warm season grass really lines up good with the time to hay. And by that I mean we generally cut this when it's hot and dry in the summer. We're kind of through the spring rains. We're here in the middle of June in this particular field of big blue stem. And they cut this big blue stem just yesterday morning. We're probably 36 hours later here and we're baling it up. It can cure as early as 24 hours. And the reason for that is, one's the weather. We're not that humid. We're got a lot of sunshine. We got long days, but also the stubble help holding it up off the ground helps the moisture wick out of it quite quick. So a lot of times actually pay attention to it after you cut it. You can get it too dry and get it kind of crumbly.
The grass keeps, it starts out short, keeps getting taller, taller, taller. When do I cut it? What is the timing of that hay cut? And so the general rule of thumb is that we're aiming for the boot stage. Boot means we've got the seed head still down in the grass. So it is not showing, like you can't see any seed heads. If you can see seed heads, you have lost a lot of quality. You've gained quantity. The amount of hay that you're making will be higher, but the quality will have really taken a nosedive. So we're aiming for that sweet spot when it's in boot. Now I'd say this big blue stem here is in early boot. And so like it is still very vegetative. We're not really seeing the vertical structure of it yet. But so here you can see this is one of the stalks that was taken off about ground level, and the seed head is going to be down in this stem somewhere down here, obviously not showing. Now the date for this is different depending on which crop you have. Do you have switchgrass, eastern gamagrass, big blue, which of these do you have? The species that you have depends on your timing, but also how far north or south you are. Obviously it warms up quicker in Georgia than it does in Missouri, than it does in Minnesota. And so getting that timing is going to depend on that as well. Let's look at this chart and go over a few, and this is from the Native Grass Forages of Eastern U.S. by Pat Kaiser. This is a chart out of his book. And let's go over a few of the magic dates that they use in the Mid-South. And of course, you're gonna have to adjust this. If you're in a mountainous area, you're gonna have to adjust it because that elevation is gonna matter. If you're further north or south, you're gonna have to adjust that as well. But this will at least give you a rule of thumb to start thinking about, when do I go out there and do the haying? When do I go out there and cut it? First cutting dates for the Mid-South. Eastern gamagrass tends to be the first one that gets cut, somewhere around May 20th to May 25th. Now, keep in mind, when I say these dates, you gotta keep in mind, where are you located compared to where this data is from. Switchgrass, May 25th to June 1st. So something like a week after the eastern gamagrass. Big blue stem and or little blue stem. So if they're in pure stands, either big or little blue stem, or it's a mixed stand that's dominated by these two species, then we're looking at June 20th to June 25th. So we're almost a whole month later than the eastern gamagrass and switchgrass. So the species makes a huge difference. Lastly, if your stand is dominated or it's a pure stand of Indian grass, we're gonna be in the June 30th to July 5th time frame. Another rule of thumb, you never wanna cut between August 25th to September 1st and dormancy. So that end of August, early September timeframe to the end of dormancy. And of course, that varies again based on where you're located at. A nice way to convert it into something other than a time might be something like 8 weeks before frost. You need to quit cutting hay, give it that time to rest, replenish its root reserves, and then once it is dormant, once it's brown like toast in the winter, you can do anything to it you want. Well, not anything, but you're welcome to hay it, you're welcome to, the quality will obviously not be very good. You can dormant graze it, you can burn it, any of those things are an option. But that recovery period right before frost is really important.
So one common question we get here is, how many times can I hay my native warm season grass field? There are several factors involved in that, but the short answer is twice usually, 3 times occasionally. The reason for those differences and some things that you could do to help is, one, do your first cutting as early as you can. I mean, you're wanting quantity and quality, but early boot. If you get out there in time, the weather's good for you, and you get that captured in that time, then you start to regrow quickly. Another thing is getting your hay off of the field. You know, once you get your first cutting out, get the hay out of the field and start letting it regrow and quit trafficking it up. Another is the cutting height that you cut it at. If you cut it at that 8 to 10 inches high range, you'll have a lot better success getting that second or third cutting.
let's look at some of the specifics in Pat Kaiser's book, and he has done a lot of research in native warm season grasses for hay, for forage, has an excellent, he's read a lot of articles, done a lot of the research, and it's an excellent resource if you're interested in learning more. But Native Grass Forages for the Eastern U.S. is the book. Let's look at the specifics of how the species that you're cutting is going to impact the frequency or how often you can cut it. So this chart shows us the number of cuttings per year for native warm season grass hayfields. And note, this is from the Mid-South, so you may need to adjust this if you're further north, further south, you're at a higher altitude, like in a mountainous region, you may need to adjust this a little bit because it affects the length of your growing season. But let's get started with Eastern Gamagrass. Eastern Gamagrass can often be cut 2 times per year, and occasionally it can be cut 3 times per year. And you're gonna wanna watch it in a minute. We will go over stand health, like how to evaluate, is my stand weakening? So if you are choosing to cut it 3 times, make sure you're keeping an eye on stand health, because that is your future production. There's no point in killing the goose that's laying that golden egg. Switchgrass, 2 times per year is common and is usually the plant can sustain that. Big blue stem, little blue stem, Indian grass. These are also 2 times per year in general, but every few years you should probably forego that second harvest. And again, keep in mind, if you're not doing the things that make native grass hay done right, in other words, you're cutting too late, you're not cutting tall enough, if you're not doing these things, it's going to mean less harvests per year. So there's really a big advantage yield-wise to get in, and quality-wise as well, to get in, get it done right, because then you're going to get more production, have a healthier stand in the end by even able to do like that extra cutting per year. One more note, and we mentioned this as well in the timing section, but we'll mention it again here because it bears thinking about when we're thinking about cut this day, cut that day, and then when do we have to stop? When can we not go past? And there's that more or less 8 weeks before the average last date of frost. So if you're in the Mid-South there, it's August 25th to September 1st. And again, this is just preserving a healthy stand because it allows those plants to put energy down into the root system to go through winter and come back next spring with great vigor and vengeance.
So as you're out there haying and observing your field, watch out for a few indications that your stand is weakening. Could be due to overhang or some other factors. But either way, keep an eye on this. And one is if the clumps of grass are thinning out. So if you're getting more space between your clumps of grass. If it's a new stand, you'll expect to see a little bit of that, but it should be replaced by another clump of grass taking one over. You shouldn't see a thinning where they're just getting further apart with bare ground in between them. Another factor is tillering. Particularly in a well-established stand, you should not see a decrease in the number of tillers or really much change in the number of tillers at all. In a fairly new stand, you would expect to see more tillers for about the first 5 to 6 years. From the time it's new to the first 5 to 6 years, you'll see an increase in the number of tillers as those crowns spread out and grow. The few other indicators that you have would be?
Weeds would be a big one to watch for. So, and this relates back to what Colt was talking about. If we've got plants that are getting a smaller and smaller footprint and they're getting fewer and fewer stems or tillers, like they're shading the ground less, right? There's more sunlight getting down to the ground. When there's more sunlight getting down to that ground, then that is a trigger for a lot of weed seeds to germinate. So if you're seeing a weedier stand, and not all weeds are going to be triggered by this, but as a general rule of thumb, watch for weediness to changes in that weediness. It may very well be a sign that you're getting a less healthy, less vigorous stand. One other factor that we're going to want to watch for is a trending towards lower yields. So there can be reasons that and a lot of these reasons are not even understood when we look at the data. There can be huge yields one year and then it dips and it's huge, and it's not just necessarily up and down. It can be, a 3 years, whatever. There's a ton of different trends you can see, and it's not necessarily related to weather either. So we're not looking for just little changes from year to year, but what we're looking for is that overall trend, the multi-year trend, is headed down as far as yield. That's not a good sign. So if you're seeing any of these, I guess the disadvantage to not haying it that second time or giving it a break is that you lose yield, obviously, in that year. But we're in this for the long haul. There's the story about the goose and the golden egg, and if you kill that goose that lays that golden egg, you just don't have any golden eggs anymore. And so keeping your stand healthy is of utmost importance if you're in this for the long haul. The quality of native warm season grass hay is often a discussion point because traditional forage tests often don't give them that super good quality rating. But the reality is there's a difference between animal performance on them and those test results. And so if we look at, if we're putting it up at the right stage, so here's our big blue stem, and if we're cutting this at 8 inches up here, we have nothing but leaf that we are putting in that hay bale. And if you look at this, this is nothing but leaves that we're putting in these hay bales out here. So this is, as far as timing, we've got it super well. Now, if we had seed heads sticking up, the hay quality would be much, much lower because as anything goes reproductive and gets seed heads, the quality just plummets. And it doesn't matter what your crop is. So as long as we're cutting it at the right time, and it doesn't rain on it while we have it down, those sort of details of putting it up well, we have good to excellent quality hay.
Part of the reason that a hay test or a nutrient density test doesn't show quite the same results between warm season and cool season grasses is warm season grasses or C4 grasses tend to have more readily available nutrients inside them. So when they break that down in the lab, the quantity is about this, if you got two that are equal quantity, the animal, when they're in the rumination and extraction process, can extract more from C4 grasses because it's less tied up.
And if we think about the on-the-ground quality that we can get, if we put stalkers on this field right now, they would be gaining, there's an old saying or adage in the Flint Hills, which is in eastern Kansas, that on the blue stem prairies that remain there in the Flint Hills, it's like the stalker capital of the US, they can get 4 pounds of gain in May, 3 pounds in June, 2 pounds in July, and a pound of gain a day in August. So here we are, the middle of June, we could probably be picking up 3 pounds of gain per day on this with stalkers. Obviously high quality forage.
Another interesting fact on haying warm seasons is you go from that really lush green color back there in the back as it dries to kind of a blue-green color, and the leaves on after you've cut it and dried it, they look much narrower and thinner. And a lot of people think they actually shrunk, and of course as the water goes out they shrink a little bit, but it's actually the same mechanism that you see in corn during drought where it starts to roll up. So as you cut that, the plant all of a sudden can't get water in its leaves and it starts to dry out, and you'll see those leaves actually roll up like a cigar, and they look much more stemmy when they're in hay than what they are because of the rolling.
One last detail we should talk about is fertility. When we're haying, we're removing nutrients from the field. So if you think about these leaves here, there's nutrients in these leaves. There's phosphorus and potassium and nitrogen and all of these things. And so replacing the nutrients that we remove from the field, unless we're going to feed it back here this winter, in which case you're just hauling them away temporarily and bringing them right back. But if we're going to sell these or feed them on another area of the farm, we're removing nutrients. So in that case, some fertility. A lot of times when we're grazing native warm season grasses, we don't even put fertility on, and different people do different things there. But it's sure within the realm of standard practice to not. But when you're haying, you're removing those nutrients, it's really advisable to put them back on. We have another video that discusses that, so check out that video for those details.
So in closing, remember, native warm season grasses make an excellent high quality hay with a lot of tonnage, and they're a long-term field. They'll last for years and years of this. Some things though you need to watch out for is the weed pressure, your fertility, also stand thinning. So take care of your investment here and it'll take care of you. Also remember that, you know, as you go through cutting hay, if you start to see those downward declines and then you pull off and hay less, it should come back fairly quickly. Another factor is some people have the urge to try to overcut and cut too often. In reality, you'll wind up with less tonnage that way in the long haul than you will by cutting less often and paying attention to that height, because these really have a long growing season window. And when you cut 2 times versus 3 times, a lot of times you'll wind up with about the same tonnage as you would, just less expense in doing it because you do it less often. This has been Cole Hamilton, Elizabeth Steele here with Hamilton Native Outpost. Hope you enjoyed this video. We enjoyed making it for you. Hope you find it beneficial on your operation. Check us out on Facebook, YouTube, and our website.
And find more management videos on native warm season grasses.